last section of chapter 2, review and test coming up very soon this week. Hopefully your graphing skills up to speed. Today is not going to focus so much on the graphing as much as how the inequality symbol adds to our work. If you remember how we graphed inequalities, we would see y is greater than 6. We would put a 6 down. This meant that 6 is not included because 6 is not bigger than 6, so we left it open, and then the arrow told us to point a certain direction. When we saw this, we put down the 4. This, because of the equal portion, told me that 4 does work because 4 is less than or equal to 4, so it's closed with the arrow pointing this way. And then we did 11, which was your number. That meant that the circle was open, pointing to the left. These graphs taught us how to analyze whether the value is what we call included versus not included. If you did not like that before, it's back to haunt you again, so make sure you work on it to try and get better. Try to figure out some way for yourself to understand the two, but I think if you work hard enough you can, or if you just come and get some assistance and we can try to work it out, but just try not to come with frustration because it doesn't usually work that way. When the value was included, we used a closed circle. When the value was not, we used the open circle. The same thing goes for graphing inequalities. It might be hard to see here, but a closed line looks like that, whereas an open line looks like this. So both of those are lines, but what you now have to transfer over from your open circle, closed circle is open line, closed line. And that's really the only thing you have to look out for first in terms of the lines themselves. Again, notice how the open line represents a line that exists but is not included. So again, when I draw a line like this, it means that that is your border, but it really isn't included. Like you can go up to the border, but you can't touch it, as if it was electrified of some sort. Shading a graph. In order to shade a graph, you must keep in mind that we shade what is true. Again, you shade what is true. You also need to understand how points in the coordinate plane work. Finally, you have to know how to check to see if your point is a solution. And then after that, you just kind of graph. So if you're asked to graph something that has an inequality, first off, that means you're going to have to test a point and shade it. So your first part is to graph it. So -2 means go down 2. 3 means go up 3 over 1. We do probably want a straight edge, so I'm going to take a piece of paper, as again you can also do. Fold it a couple times. Excuse me for a second, it takes me a while to fold things. And then draw your line. Now in this case it has to go all the way across because we're shading. So with this picture here, the other thing we need to ask ourselves is, are we drawing an open or closed line? That would be an open circle, which means we want a line with breaks in it. So the line we're going to draw looks like this. Not the greatest line ever, but does the trick. Now in most situations, 0, 0 is available, which is good. That is the easiest point to test, because when you plug 0 in for y, it turns into 0. When you plug in 0 in for x, that whole term turns to 0, -2. And again, what it gives me is a really quick test. 0 is bigger than -2, which is true because 0 is bigger than every negative number. And because we are shading what is true, and because this is true, you're going to shade that side. Again, I don't need a perfect colored everything filled in, but I do need you to shade the true side. Now you might need to bring your computer over for the first time you do a couple graphs so I can show you how the graphing mechanism works, or just play around with it and you'll figure it out. But what you need to understand is that every time you graph a function, this graph, or this barrier, separates everything that is true from everything that is false. So every time you graph, whatever you're graphing separates all the true values from all the false values, which is what we're trying to do, so we can separate everything that is good from everything that is bad. Second graph, 4x plus 5y greater than or equal to 20. Again, this is standard form, so this is the one where we say 4x equals 20. Yes, I put equals because we'll deal with that part later. That means that x is 5. Then we do 5y equals 20, which means that y is 4, which is a positive 4. Again, take your straight edge. This here is a closed circle. Sorry to confuse you by turning the paper all over the place, but closed circle going all the way across, looking like this. Once again, 0, 0 is available to me, so I can use it, and that's nice because again that allows me to say that turns into 0, that turns into 0, and the 20 stays there. 0 greater than or equal to 20 is actually false, and because this is false, and because this separates everything truth from everything that is false, it means we don't want this side, so jump over it and shade the other side. That is how this part works. Alright. Now, what happens if 0, 0 is not available? That is what C is going to show us. Because C, whenever you see this part here, what you have here is y and x by itself. Pretty much the plus 0 isn't there, but you want to keep in mind that it is there, which means that your y-intercept is 0. From there, you need a slope. So y equals 2/3 x means go up 2 over 3. And I'm not going to use a straight edge because I want to make sure that I at least go with a little bit more speed here, but you understand that you need the straight edge. But that would be an open line because that was an open circle. Again, the problem is now the 0, 0 is not available. That means pick another point. For me, let's pick this one. It doesn't matter which point you pick, but it does help to circle it. This is 0, 1, which means that x is 0, y is 1, which means, let's take this and check it out. That would turn to 1 is less than, if you put a 0 right there, 0 turns there. Is 1 less than 0? No. Go back to check that one more time. X is 0, so that would be 0. Y is 1, that would be 1. 1 is not smaller than 0, so that is false. This graph separates everything true from everything false, which means that we probably want to shade this way. Now those are the graphs that you actually saw probably last year in your Algebra 1 class. The graphs coming up are the ones that you have to know now because these are what we've been working on. So again, you can also do inequalities with these complex parts. I think the only ones you're going to have to deal with is absolute value. So that's kind of good. This goes left, that goes down. So 2 left, 1, 2, and 1 down puts me here. There's no factor there, so we go over 1, up 1, back 1, up 1, and again, this is closed because that would be equal. So again, we can draw that graph, and again, you do want to use a ruler for a test, but I'm just kind of doing this for your notes. The beauty of this again is that you notice that 0, 0 is available, and that helps because it allows me to just turn that into a 0, but I do have to do a little bit of work. But that, if that becomes 0 plus 2, turns into the absolute value of 2. That is why 0 is nice, because that's just going to be 0 plus 2 minus 1, which turns into 0 is greater than 2 minus 1. 0 is greater than or equal to 1. 0 bigger than 1 is false, which means we don't want anything on this side of the barrier, which means we want the inside portion of that barrier. If it was true, we would have shaded everything outside. But again, once you see true or false, once you check it, make sure you figure out what part you're shading before you shade. This one here goes to the right, that goes up. So right 1, up 2 is here. Again, there's no stretch factor or no negative, so that goes here. But you must be careful because that is a open circle. Again, nice thing, 0, 0 is available, which means we end up with 0 greater than absolute value absolute value negative 1, because that's going to be 0 minus 1, plus 2, which means 0 is greater than 1 plus 2, because remember the absolute value of negative 1 is 1. 0 is greater than 3, which again is false. And so therefore, what we're looking at here is if that is false, that is true. I was just kind of hoping on the inside that I would have picked something where you actually shaded the outside of it, but you'll be okay once you get to your homework. And then the last one, this goes left, that goes down, so 1 left, 1 down. Again, no stretch factor, so over 1, up 1, back 1, up 1. Closed circle, but you notice that this line now goes through 0, 0. Now you have to be careful, especially if you don't use a ruler, because you want to make sure you pick a point that is actually where it visually is. For example, if my line curves around something but doesn't put it in, like I wouldn't test this because I'm not sure if that's really inside or outside. But something that's clearly on that side of the line, I would pick. I did 0, 1 before just to show you how 0, 1 worked. This time I'm going to do 1, 0 because that's what that point is. So again, that means that y is 0. This turns into 1, so 1 plus 1 turns into the absolute value of 2 minus 1. That means that 0 is less than or equal to 2 minus 1. 0 is less than or equal to 1, which is true. So finally we get something on the outside, and if this is true, it means everything outside that barrier is true, and so our shade would go there. Overall, your graphing skill does not change as long as you know how to graph. You will be fine on the first portion of the work. Just remember to, again, identify the type of line and test a point. Practice, practice, and practice, and remember that practice does not make perfect, it makes permanent, and if you practice wrong, that's why you actually make your mistakes. So that's why I sit up at the desk, that's why I wait for you to come ask questions, so that you can learn how to come and try to fix whenever you do have an error, but fix it soon so it doesn't become a habit. Other than that, there was one more thing I was going to say. It's just getting old. Okay, well, just make sure you get some help on this stuff and go to your Math Excel. Good luck.